The fact that just from the distance of the moon you can put your thumb up and you can hide the Earth behind your thumb. Marveled Jim Lovell, who orbited the moon on the Apollo 8 and Apollo 13 missions. But then how fortunate we are to have this body and to be able to enjoy living here amongst the beauty of the Earth itself. To watch Artemis soar into the skies this week was to get a glimpse of the hopes of humanity ascending too. And you're listening to NPR News.
Weekend edition WFYI Public Radio. Good morning, I'm Russ Maloney. Maybe you're headed downtown tonight for the Final Four, or maybe you're not. You're going to stay home this evening and listen to the Blues House Party and enjoy new and recent releases, plus rock bands covering the blues and the original recordings. The Blues House Party with host Matthew Sosi this evening, 7 to 9, followed by small studio signal boost here on WFYI Public Radio. Support comes from Fathers and Families Center, dedicated to helping men improve their parenting skills, financially and emotionally support their families, and serve the community. More at ffcindiana.org. Support comes from Indie Grills and Outdoor Living, creating indoor or outdoor fireplaces, outdoor kitchens, and custom patios. More info and pictures of projects at indiegrills.com.
I'm Windsor Johnston with these headlines. President Trump is proposing a major increase in defense spending, calling for a $1.5 trillion budget in 2027. The plan prioritizes military investments while cutting funding for domestic programs by about 10%. Iran has shot down 2 U.S. aircraft in separate attacks, marking the first time American planes have been brought down in the 5-week conflict. The U.S. says 2 pilots have been rescued. The other remains missing. The president has signed an executive order aimed at regulating college athletics. The White House says it places limits on name, image, and likeness deals. It also restricts transfer portal use and caps eligibility at 5 years. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Proven Winners with Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, offering flowering shrubs and evergreens for gardens and landscapes at garden centers nationwide. ProvenWinnersColorChoice.com/NPR. From Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Look at the economy now. The Labor Department says the United States added 178,000 jobs in March to bring the unemployment rate down 0.1%. But revisions to February show a loss of more than 130,000 jobs that month, while January was revised slightly up. We also know that prices are up and consumer sentiment is down. Heather Long joins us now. She's the chief economist with Navy Federal Credit Union and author of the Everyday Economics newsletter on Substack. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
What are we seeing?
Well, it really feels like a yo-yo right now that's going on in the economy. We're talking about the job market. And when I saw the data on Friday morning, I said, wow, this looks great. 178,000 jobs added in March. Certainly no impact from the war in Iran yet. But obviously people are frustrated because if you step back, there's been virtually no hiring since last April, except in healthcare. If you strip away healthcare, most other industries have been doing layoffs. And obviously, that's a really hard environment. And I think it's indicative of what we're seeing across the economy, which is jobless growth. On the one hand, the economy is still growing. We got this AI boom. But on the other hand, the middle class is frustrated. You can't change jobs. And obviously the gas prices and the tariffs are having a real impact on people.
Are the jobs going to AI one way or another?
Not yet, but I would say it this way. It's not that AI can do very many people's jobs, maybe a few coding jobs, but companies are spending so much money investing in AI and the latest technology that there simply isn't a lot of money left to hire or to give big pay raises anymore. And so it's almost like the AI investment is eating the jobs. And now there's concern with the war in Iran that as these gas and diesel prices rise, if they stay high and stay elevated, that's also eating into company budgets. And does that force even less hiring or potentially layoffs later this year?
Is that what we call, and I'm not sure why, the K-shaped economy?
Yeah, the K-shaped economy, I believe I helped name that last year, but it's this concept that people in the top 20%, which is basically people earning $170,000 or more, they're doing really well. Generally speaking, they are benefiting from the AI investments, which have really driven big stock market gains. I know the stock market had a little bit of a correction in the last few weeks, but by and large, it's been a great couple of years for investors. And those folks, they don't worry that much. Many of them drive Teslas and whatnot, and so they're not as worried about the gas prices, and they just keep spending and spending. And we can see it in our data. You know, we have 15 million members at Navy Federal. We track credit and debit card spending every day. And a lot of those top of the K folks, they went out and booked their summer vacations in March because they wanted to get in ahead of the airfares going up. So they were spending like crazy in March to lock in, the lower prices.
Let me ask you about revisions that have now become common to the monthly figures. What do you make of that?
It's really hard to watch. Basically, what's going on is a lot of the data that you see with the 178,000 jobs added in March, it comes from a survey, a survey of over 100,000 businesses. And basically, people don't like responding to surveys anymore, including businesses. And so in the first few weeks when that data is collected, not many businesses respond right away. But by the second and the third month, so by 90 days after the deadline, most companies do respond. And so that's why you see these revisions. They're being revised because they actually are getting a lot more data, a lot more survey responses in. But the big question is, why can't people respond when you need them to a lot faster like they used to?
What are the important numbers to look at in the economy as far as you're concerned? Is it jobs? Is it consumer sentiment? What is it? The stock market?
The biggest concern right now is obviously the war in Iran. How long is it going to last? When is that Strait of Hormuz going to open? And really, from an economic perspective, it's when do these prices get so high that Americans stop spending on other things?
What's your advice for American families now?
It's good to be cautious. I think for most people, it's really paying off credit card debt and trying to save a little bit more because in uncertain times, you just don't know.
Heather Long, who's the Navy Federal Credit Union's chief economist, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Maria de Jesus Estrada Juarez arrived in the U.S. as a minor in 1998, and she became a dreamer. The 42-year-old is one of hundreds of thousands of people who are protected from deportation by the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, policy. She earned a high school diploma here. She worked. She paid taxes. She had a daughter. And this year she became the target of the Trump administration and was deported to Mexico in February. After a federal judge ruled that her deportation was unlawful, Estrada Juarez returned home to Sacramento, California this week, and she joins us now with her daughter, Damaris Bello. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Maria, I gather you were deported the day after an immigration hearing to obtain a green card. What happened?
So I applied for my green card. We went to the appointment. Within not even 30 minutes, I got detained and deported back to Mexico in less than 24 hours. I mentioned multiple times I am a DACA recipient. My DACA is active. I got ignored. I asked to speak to a judge, and no, it was just like a no. If it seems like they just want to, get rid of me like as soon as possible.
Damaris, what was that like for you?
I can't describe it. Honestly, I think it was just a nightmare. I'm an only child, so it was very overwhelming. When she was taken, I remember feeling powerless, and I was looking around in the room for someone to help me. In that moment, you realize that no one in that room is there to help you. Everyone there is against you. I felt helpless, small, and invisible.
Maria, how did the United States send you to Mexico?
After I got detained, it's oh God. They handcuffed my feet, my waist with my hands, and I was transported like I was the worst criminal of ever. I asked, "Where are we going?" And usually, the answer is, "We're gonna take you where you need to go." And after taking a minute, to put myself together to get on the van, I got on the van. I think my first stop was Stockton.
Stockton, California, yeah.
From there, I went to Bakersfield, to LA, straight to the Mexico border. I have diabetes and I have medication that I needed to take. And I remember not taking it in the morning because I usually take my shot in the afternoon after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept asking through the way, for my medication. And they say, okay, we'll have it. One of the agents, or I don't really know if they're agents or not.
Yeah, they didn't have any uniforms, right?
Yeah, one of them, he asked me what kind of medication you take for your diabetes. I said I get, they prescribe me with Ozempic once a week. And he kind of laughed. And he said, Ozempic is to lose weight, not for diabetes. So I didn't get my medication. Another thing, they refer to us that we're not people, that we're just things, not humans. I never felt so humiliated like that ever in my life, especially because I'm not a criminal. I've never done anything wrong for me to feel that way.
May I ask, what was it like being separated?
Like I mentioned before, I'm an only child, so
I don't know how old you are, may I ask?
I'm 22.
Yeah.
I had to step up into responsibilities that I never had to handle before because my mother held everything together. Rent, bills, insurance. I really didn't even have time to process what was happening emotionally. Being separated from my mother, not being able to be with her, wake up in the mornings, have breakfast with her before she went to work was the worst part of it all. They don't understand. They say they're enforcing the law, but what often gets lost is the human impact, families being separated, and people like me are left trying to figure out how to survive.
I have never been so, that long of period of time away from my daughter. We always together, and there were moments of my days that I wasn't able to take deep breaths because it will hurt, it will hurt a lot. I used to see kids with their moms and it will break my heart. The only thing I had at the moment, it was a picture of my daughter. Video call and her blanket that
It was with me all the time. I felt like I was dying day by day without her.
Damaris, how did you work to get your mother back?
I did everything I could, the way she raised me, all the morals and values that she instilled in me, like being a strong person, never letting anyone try to silence you. I think that definitely had a lot to do with the way that I acted to make sure that she wasn't what felt like they were trying to do was erase her and strip her from her life that she built here.
My daughter, she knocked on multiple doors. She reached out to every single person that we were advised to talk to. And it makes me feel really proud of my daughter that she did not let her boys to be quiet. And she spoke, until she fulfilled her need to bring me back.
What's it like to be back together, but knowing, despite a judge's ruling, you've got, I guess, a hearing or an appearance ahead?
Reuniting with my mom, there was so much relief and so much gratitude. I felt that everything that I did was worth it in the end, especially reaching out to all these people who were interested in my mother's story. I've had to repeat what happened several times, and it often felt like I was reliving that moment every single time I've had to explain myself or tell my mom's story. So it was very emotionally taxing, but being with her, it made it worth it in the end. And if I have to say it 1,000 times more, I will, because I was just so grateful to have her with me. It doesn't erase everything that happened. Kind of just gives you the chance to start the healing process.
Damaris Bello and her mother, Maria de Jesus Estrada Juarez, reunited again in Sacramento. Thank you both very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Department of Homeland Security did not respond to NPR's request for comment. In an earlier statement, DHS called the judge's order to return Maria de Jesus Estrada Juarez, quote, another ruling from a Biden-appointed activist judge. Previously, agency officials have said that DACA does not give anyone legal status. And you're listening to Weekend Edition from NPR News. Today is Holy Saturday, the day before Easter, and across the country, people will be coloring eggs, attending Easter vigils, and baking lamb cakes. Not cakes made of lamb, but, cakes, baked in lamb-shaped molds. They have a long history in Europe, and as Dina Pritchett reports, they're also growing fans in America.
For nearly 40 Easters, Alona Steinke has baked a lamb-shaped cake at her home in Camas, Washington.
Try to get it nice and fluffy.
The batter itself is basic pound cake. Butter beaten with sugar and eggs, a dash of rum, some flour, and ground hazelnuts. But then there are two pans, each composing half a lamb. Steinke coats them with nonstick spray.
Otherwise it will stick and he will lose body parts when we hand mold him.
She then fastens the two sides together, very securely. I am clocking 2 big clips, 4 small clips, and a couple paper clips.
Some people also tie string around them.
When early Christians connected Jesus' death on Good Friday with the tradition of the sacrificial Passover lamb, lambs became a symbol of Easter. Add in a return to buttery, eggy pastries after Lent, and you've got a tradition. It's not clear exactly when lambs started surfacing in cake form, but in Central Europe, there are lamb-shaped pans that date back centuries.
I remember my grandmother, she had this old form, it was heavy, it was iron.
Cecilia Rakusek heads the National Czech and Slovak Museum in Iowa. Growing up in a small town in South Dakota, her family would actually bring their Easter lamb cake to church.
We'd be standing in line and the priest, he would, bless it. And then we would put it back in the car, have the mass, and go home.
In the 1940s, the company now known as Nordic Ware began mass-producing aluminum versions of the lamb pan. And thanks to social media, lambs have now spread even further. New Orleans baker Bronwyn Wyatt posted a tutorial on Instagram a few years ago showing how you can make a lamb cake even without a specialized pan. It calls for a loaf cake, a couple of artfully trimmed muffins, and plenty of frosting.
Because the way the head is affixed, they always have this kind of like jaunty, attentive bent.
The cakes people bake using her tutorial have been delightfully unhinged. Some have lopsided licorice eyes. Some are covered with magnolia petals and gold dust.
They are just as joyful to look at when somebody makes them with a lot of skill or if somebody makes them who is an amateur baker.
This year, Wyatt is hosting what she calls a Gay Easter Lamb Cake Bake-Along as a fundraiser for LGBTQ rights organizations. Back in Camas, Washington, Alona Steinke gives her lamb a traditional shower of powdered sugar and a red ribbon, and some American additions.
So here's his grass, which is green coconut. And then we can put some jelly bean eggs around him.
Steinke did not actually grow up with lamb cakes. She adopted the tradition when her family hosted a German exchange student the year the Berlin Wall came down. She says that, as a Christian, she thinks of the lamb as representing Christ's resurrection and the new life of spring.
It also is a reminder that God loves us and we need to love our neighbors. And that's so important right now. Man, people are forgetting about love. Yep, we need a little sweetness.
Even if that sweetness is a little lopsided or sticks to the side of the pan, the message is the same. For NPR News, I'm Dina Pritchett.
This is NPR News.
In 1930s Germany, a surprise archaeological find uncovered a 9,000-year-old trove of goods and the skeleton of a shaman. The Nazis claimed it was proof of Aryan roots, but new genetic analysis shows
she is not a white Aryan man, she's a dark skin-colored woman.
We hear the evolution of a shaman's story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
You've watched the iconic performances.
It's really a tiny, tiny desk.
You've seen the memes.
And now you can listen to NPR's Tiny Desk concerts and hear the stories behind them on this station.
Tiny Desk Radio, based on the hit concert series, coming soon.
Listen Friday night at 9 on WFYI and WFYI.org.
I'm Windsor Johnston with these headlines. U.S. forces are continuing to search for a missing American service member after an F-15 fighter jet was shot down in southern Iran. 2 crew members have been rescued. The Trump administration says it had previously targeted Iran's air defense systems. Israel says it's carried out a new wave of strikes on what it calls regime infrastructure in Tehran. The military says it hit air defense sites and facilities tied to weapons storage and research. Oil prices are rising. Crude reached about $112 a barrel on Friday. The average price for regular gas in the U.S. is just over $4 a gallon, nearing $6 in California. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all on the web at theschmidt.org. From Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts. And from the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people. Online at wtgrantfoundation.org.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. 2:24 a.m., November 29, 2019. A young man paced back and forth on a high balcony of the Riverwalk apartment tower in London. Cameras at MI6 headquarters recorded the scene as the young man leapt into the Thames River and died. Zach Bretler was 19. His parents were shocked and bereaved and then they were staggered to learn that their son had adopted a false identity. Zach Ismailov, the son and heir of a Russian oligarch. London Falling is the new book that tries to unravel the other lives and questions about Zach Bretler and the London underworld. Patrick Radden Keefe is a staff writer at The New Yorker and author of previous books, including Say Nothing and Empire of Pain. He joins us from our studios in New York. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's great to be with you.
The police ruled his death as suicide. What drove his parents, Rochelle and Matthew Bretler, to think something more might be involved and investigate?
Well, the police didn't actually rule the death a suicide in any conclusive sense. What they did know from that camera on MI6 was that Zach was alone on the balcony, so he jumped. He wasn't pushed. But there was enough going on in this story to make initially the police and then more enduringly the Bretler family suspicious. So they learned that he had lived this secret life that they hadn't known about as a teenager, moving through London, pretending that he was the son of a Russian oligarch, and that he had gotten mixed up with some pretty dicey older men, both of whom were in the apartment on the night that he died.
Why did Zach Bretler try to assume other identities? And he was pretty convincing, good at accents, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, Zach was an interesting kid. You know, he had grown up from when he was very young having a gift for repartee. He could do accents, he could do voices, and from a fairly early age, he started to embroider his stories. And he was an upper-middle-class kid who lived in Maida Vale in West London, grandson of a rabbi, went to a nice private school in London. But when he arrived there at 13, he met the children of oligarchs, this new generation of wealthy foreigners, many from the former Soviet Union, who had arrived in London with their great fortunes and built huge properties or bought huge properties and sent their kids to fancy schools. And so in that environment, Zach was exposed to some of these kids, and he was very taken in.
Taken in? Was there some sort of hollowness in his life, or it's hard to say?
That's part of what's interesting about this story is this is not about a kid who really wanted for much. He had parents who loved him. He really could have done anything. But there was a kind of corrosive anxiety, I think, about not having more. And, you know, in some ways, this is a very specific story about one boy who was a fabulist and who died too young. In other ways, I feel as though there are elements of this story that many of us would recognize. And so Zach Bretler was born in 2000. You know, he grew up with a phone, with social media. He grew up in a culture that was a very kind of hustle culture, a culture that really worshipped wealth. And so even though by any objective measurement this was a kid who had a lot, he wanted more.
He fell into company with Akbar Shamji, a businessman in his 40s. How did they wind up using each other, in a sense?
I think I found what I think of as kind of patient zero with Zach's imposture, that there was a guy who he met at an opening one night, and Zach was 18 at the time at this art opening, and he introduced himself as the son of a Russian oligarch. And this guy who he met was an older man, a London man, who worked for Chelsea Football Club, actually a famous soccer team owned by, at the time, a Russian oligarch, Roman Abramovich. So a pretty gutsy person to try this lie on. But it worked. And the guy introduced him to Akbar Shamji. So Akbar Shamji was this kind of glamorous, handsome guy. And he said, I have this business deal. I have this real estate deal in Portugal, and we're looking for investors. And Zach said, oh, I might be interested. And so the two of them kind of became friends. And what I reveal in the book is that Akbar Shamji was not who he appeared to be either. Unbeknownst to Zach, Akbar had recently declared bankruptcy. And so you have this kind of interesting situation in which you get these two guys who develop a quite close friendship, but they're both kind of conning one another.
He would walk his dog, Alpha Nero. How did Zach's concocted identity fit into a part of London?
I lived in London in 2000, 2001. I was there for grad school. And I've gone back a lot since. I still have dear friends there. And I've seen the city change. It has become a very hospitable place for foreign money, I think often quite dodgy foreign money. They've really sort of rolled out the red carpet for a certain type of unsavory, unscrupulous foreign business person. And along with that comes a whole sort of parasitic culture of hustlers. And so you go to these areas, this neighborhood Mayfair, where these guys spend a lot of time, and it's a lot of big supercars and, very blingy people and luxury goods and casinos and private nightclubs. And Zach sort of entered into that swirl, but he also realized, if I'm just Zach Bretler, this 18-year-old, nobody's going to have much interest in me. But if I come in and I'm this exotic young scion, people will really want to get me past the velvet rope and into the room. And he was not wrong. I mean, it worked spectacularly well until it didn't.
And we should note his relationship with his parents grew harder to handle, didn't it? There were instances of violence.
Part of what I wanted to capture in the book was this challenge for his parents, who see their son start becoming a person that they don't really recognize. They feel as though he starts to kind of worship some false gods. And at a certain point, he turns 18. He starts spending more time out of the house. He's talking about all these business things he's doing. There's a notion that he'll just skip college altogether and go right into business. And he has these older, wealthy friends. And so there's this kind of tricky thing where they want to hold him as close to them as they can, but they're worried that if they hold him too tightly, he'll run away. And there is a moment of violence with his mother, Rochelle, and it's terrifying.
The Bretlers, your parents, did they somehow feel responsible for what happened to their son?
I think they did. When I initially met them, they had not told their story publicly. They'd actually deliberately kept it quite quiet, but they decided to go public. And I spent a great deal of time talking to this family. And one of the things that they will be quick to acknowledge is a sense of responsibility, a sense that there must have been things that we could have done or shouldn't have done. There must have been off-ramps we didn't see. And I have to say, having spent a great deal of time looking into this, and also being somebody who's, I'm pretty attuned to familial denial as a phenomenon, I'm not sure that's true. I think that the scarier, the more disquieting idea is that you can do all the right things for your child, and still there may be some sense in which they become something you can't control, and they court a fate that you can't protect them from.
Patrick Radden Keefe, his new book, London Falling. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
40 years ago, Bruce Hornsby broke out with The Way It Is.
That's just the way it is. Some things have never changed.
And it remains his biggest hit. It's been sampled by dozens of R&B, rap, and electronic artists. And since then, Bruce Hornsby has performed many musical styles himself, including rock, bluegrass, jazz, and classical, even synth-driven pop. And that's the title track from Bruce Hornsby's Indigo Park, a new album that puts his wide range fully on display. Bruce Hornsby joins us now. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, it's nice to be here, Scott. I have to make a little correction there. Synth-driven pop. There's no synths on this record. The synth part of the arrangements is being filled on this record by a Rickenbacker 12th string, a la Roger McGuinn. So in certain cases,
oh my gosh,
yes. So that's the fun of it. It may sound like a synth, but it's not. It's my Birdsian moment, hopefully.
Well, we meant it as a compliment in any case.
Yeah, no, I know. It's all fine. I've just thought it'd be just for accuracy's sake.
What's it like 40 years out from The Way It Is? Do you ever get tired of playing that song?
Well, I went for a time where I did. I was being kind of stubborn about it. I thought if the crowd was there to hear The Way It Is only, well, maybe I should have just played the first song like a lot of my friends do who had one hit. But now I really embrace it as I come to feel that it's become a song for the ages. It seems to be, especially with the the hip-hop community's embrace of it. So really now I don't get tired of it. I have different versions of it. There's the solo piano version and the band version. And so the short answer is no, I'm not tired of it. I embrace it.
Let me ask you about some of the noted collaborations on this album.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, why not? Let's begin with you and Bonnie Raitt, the song Ecstatic.
Try to make the ecstatic last.
We've just remained friends. We've done benefits together through the years. But I had this song inspired by AAU basketball chants that we as AAU basketball parents would chant with our fellow parents in the stands. I always wanted to write a song using those chants. And so I did, and I thought Bonnie, if she was into it, then I wanted her to do it. And she embraced it and did such a great job. I'm so glad we mixed her loud in the mix. It was fun hearing that little snippet that you played.
And let me ask you about working with Bob Weir, co-founder of the Grateful Dead, and of course left us earlier this year.
Yeah, that hits so hard. It's a tough one. Bobby and I played together for a really long time. And so, look, he was a great friend of mine, and I had this song that I'd recorded for this record, a song I'd written with Robert Hunter, the transcendent lyricist of the Dead. And so I ran into him at a Robbie Robertson tribute concert at the Forum in L.A. And I said, hey, I've got this song. If you have any interest in singing a duet with me?
Might as well be me, Florinda, to love you through thick and thin.
And so it was beautiful to have him on there. And again, it hits a little harder now that he's not around anymore. This certainly has to be at least one of his last recorded performances.
Rock my soul with a 2x4. Whatever it was, with it ain't no more.
What do these collaborations put into your music? Do they help keep you fresh?
I think it helps keep everything fresh for myself and anyone listening. It's just fun to get someone else's take on something. I think it just enhances and broadens your palette, broadens the colors that you're able to paint with.
Let me ask you about the song Silhouette Shadows.
Silhouettes and shadows, ancient scenes and cryptic dreams. Silhouettes and shadows, I sort of remember in the dim light, in the sharp outline, a cardboard cutout, shaded recollections, one life in reflection.
I found this song chilling. And maybe because we're age peers, as they say.
Yeah.
But boy, how does looking back and lining up what you've seen in history change as you go on in life, do you think?
Well, let's see. You look at it differently as you get older. You look at everything maybe a bit different. And in this case, the Silhouette Shadows song features 4 verses that are all reminiscences. The first 3 mostly coming from my music school days. But this last one is probably the deepest, the most intense of them all. Everyone of a certain age remembers where they were when they found out that President Kennedy had been shot.
In 3rd grade, waiting for the intercom to tell us when the buses arrive on a Friday afternoon, November 22. Interrupted by a TV voice telling us the president's been shot. Then kids erupted in glee.
Has the thought ever occurred to you that you could have a very busy, contented, and fulfilling life just playing your biggest hits out to groups?
Oh, what a prison. Of course, that's true, but I'm just not interested in moving in that world. I'm interested in the now. I'm looking for tomorrow musicians rather than yesterday musicians, and I'm looking for tomorrow music more so than nostalgic music. So no, I really don't want to do that. I'm really not interested. If I had to do that, I'd probably just stop.
Bruce Hornsby, his new album, out now, Indigo Park. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for being knowledgeable. It's very nice of you.
I'm building my memory palace, shadow placement and long thought chains, Fibonacci numbers in sequence behind the eyes, mnemonic gates.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News, where, as Bruce Hornsby might put it, the way it is that B.J. Liederman does our theme music. I'm Scott Simon.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the University at Buffalo, where innovative AI degrees are dedicated to putting students at the forefront of realizing AI for good. More at buffalo.edu/NPR. From Cigna Healthcare. At Cigna Healthcare, they're dedicated to being there through life's everyday and extraordinary health moments. Learn more at cigna.com/better. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Weekend Edition, WFYI Public Radio. Good morning. I'm Russ Maloney. If you're headed out tonight, maybe for the basketball festivities or just for anything else, depending on when this front moves through, might be a very different evening. When you come out of wherever you are, it might be much colder. We have a low tonight of 40 after a high today in the 70s with rain and a possible thunderstorm. Hour number 2 of Weekend Edition just ahead, WFYI Public Radio.
Support comes from St. Richard's Episcopal School, helping preschoolers age 3 and up grow as whole learners through hands-on discovery and classes in music, French, STEAM, PE, and library. More at sresdragons.org. Support comes from Holman Landscape Architects and Contractors, celebrating National Native Plant Month while creating and caring for landscapes that improve the environment. More at holmanlandscape.com.
Millions of people depend on the NPR network. We depend on you. Your support is central to our journalistic integrity. Donate to this station today, and thank you.
Give today at wfyi.org/give.
You are listening to WFYI FM Indianapolis, simulcast in partnership with Indiana State University and Wabash College on WISU Terre Haute and WNDY Crawfordsville. Online at WFYI.org.
From NPR News in Washington, D.C., this is Weekend Edition. I'm Scott Simon. This hour, the latest from the war in Iran. Later, sports, the Final Four and a championship this weekend. Then Jonathan, the 194-year-old tortoise, lives beyond reports of his demise. Philip Seastead's new novel with the title Too Long to Say Here. And Kevin Kline says he'd hoped his new series, American Classic, wouldn't show actors just as vain buffoons.
I labored under the delusion that I'll have a chance to kind of undo all the wrongs that cinema has done to actors over the years. But I don't think I succeeded.
And first we have our newscast. Today is Saturday, April 4, 2026.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The search continues for a missing U.S. service member after Iranian forces shot down 2 American planes over Iran on Friday. NPR's Greg Myrie reports.
An F-15, which is a very good fighter jet, was struck by Iranian fire in western Iran, and this set off an urgent rescue operation by U.S. forces for the 2 crew members, a pilot and a weapons officer. One was rescued. We still don't know the fate of the other. The rescue operation is still ongoing. This is coming from a U.S. official not authorized to speak publicly.
That's NPR's Greg Myrie reporting. President Trump says he expects to wrap up the war in Iran in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but there are hints that more fighting may be coming. Lebanon says at least 23 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Friday. About a third of the country's population is Christian, but the lead up to Easter has been subdued this year. NPR's Lauren Frere reports from Beirut.
Holy Week services are mixed with funerals and the sound of explosions. Israel's military says it's striking Hezbollah's infrastructure after killing 1,000 of its members. 3 United Nations peacekeepers have been wounded at their base in the south. The UN says it doesn't know the origin of the explosion. Israel says it was a Hezbollah rocket. 3 UN peacekeepers were also killed there last week. Meanwhile, as the US and Israel attack Iran and Iran retaliates against US allies in the Gulf, Lebanon has not been hit by Iranian fire. But the US embassy in Beirut says Iran may now target U.S. universities in Lebanon. The American University of Beirut has shifted some classes online. The embassy has also upped its overall warning, telling U.S. citizens to leave Lebanon now. Lauren Frere, NPR News, Beirut.
Millions of Christians around the world are celebrating Easter as Holy Week comes to a close. In a video message marking the holiday, President Trump reflected on the significance of the season.
Christ displayed true humility. In his death, he modeled true love. And in his resurrection from the tomb, he proved that even death itself will not silence those who place their trust in Almighty God.
The president said Easter is a reminder that faith endures and that good ultimately triumphs over evil. He also pointed to what he called a renewed interest in religion across the country. President Trump has signed an executive order that the White House says is needed to regulate college athletics. It puts limits on name, image, and licensing agreements for players, and it limits the number of times an undergraduate student athlete can enter the transfer portal. It also caps the number of years a player can participate in college sports to 5 years. The executive order is expected to be challenged in court, and some members of Congress are also pushing legislation that's similar to the executive order. This is NPR. Amazon has announced a fuel surcharge in response to higher oil prices brought on by the war in Iran. As NPR's Andrea Hsu reports, the fee will be imposed on third-party sellers who use the company's warehouses and delivery systems.
Starting April 17th, Amazon third-party sellers will see a 3.5% increase to their fulfillment fees. In a message to sellers, the company said that equates to an average of 17 cents per unit, a cost sellers could pass on to customers. Amazon said it had been absorbing increased fuel prices, but like other major carriers, it was hiking fees to recover a portion of its added costs. UPS and FedEx imposed new fuel surcharges last month, and the U.S. Postal Service says starting April 26th, it's adding an 8% surcharge to package and shipping services, including Priority Mail and Parcel Select. First-class stamps will not be affected. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
Amazon is a financial supporter of NPR. Airline bag fees are going up as fuel costs rise. United now plans to charge $45 for a first check bag on flights across North America and parts of Latin America, and $55 for a second bag. That's about $10 more than it was before the conflict with Iran. JetBlue has also raised prices, and analysts expect other airlines to soon follow. I'm Windsor Johnston, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation. Luminescence Foundation is dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives. This is NPR.
When Texas lawmakers seek to review a list of books, librarians find themselves on the front lines of the national battle. Across America, they unite to defend open access against growing content bans. Join WFYI Live for an Indie Lens pop-up screening of The Librarians on April 21st at Central Library. Get more information about the program and free tickets at WFYI.org/live.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Thank you for being with us. The past 48 hours have seen increases in attacks on Iran and Iran's ability to strike back. 2 U.S. planes have been shot down, including an F-15 fighter jet. Both Iranian and American forces are searching for one missing U.S. crew member. We're joined now by NPR's Dee Parvaz in Van, Turkey. Dee, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, Scott.
What are the latest developments?
Well, as you mentioned, the past couple of days have been especially intense. That downed F-15 jet, both crew members ejected, and while U.S. officials confirmed to NPR that one had been rescued, the fate of the other one remains unknown. Multiple Iranian state media outlets reported that the pilot might have been captured by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, but there's no confirmation of that. And then there was this call out on Iranian TV. She's asking tribal and local villagers in the area of the downed jet to target and capture any U.S. pilots or crew members, offering a monetary reward. There are also reports of a couple of U.S. helicopters sent in to rescue the crew being struck. I reached out to U.S. Central Command for updates on the search for the missing crew member and for confirmation on those helicopter strikes, but haven't heard back. And Scott, there was also another plane downed, an A-10 Warthog shot down near Iran's coast. That pilot was rescued. But in all of this, one thing is clear, and that's Iranian airspace isn't uncontested, as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said was the case as early as the first week of the war.
There were significant strikes in Iran and elsewhere, too, right?
Yeah, the U.S. and Israeli strikes have been hitting many targets, including a weapons depot and a nuclear power plant. But some strikes have also hit targets like the B-1 bridge between the cities of Tehran and Karaj. In response to that strike, Iran released a list of bridges in the region that they could destroy. And there was also a strike on a Red Crescent warehouse in Bushehr. And Iranian media also had reports that U.S. and Israeli strikes hit the Azadi Sports Stadium in Tehran, as well as caused damage to Shahid Beheshti University. And on top of all of this, Iran launched multiple strikes in the region, including one at Oracle's offices in Dubai overnight and an intercepted attack on an Abu Dhabi gas site. They also hit a water desalination plant and an oil refinery in Kuwait. And its strikes on Israel continued as well, damaging some homes, cars, as well as a train station in Tel Aviv.
Dee, you've been interviewing Iranians at the border there in Turkey. What kind of reviews, if you please, do they give President Trump's messaging on this war?
Well,